All right, before I get started today, I'm just going to check to make sure I am actually live. Hold just 1 second. Let's see here. Let's see. Thanks for hanging tight. Let's see. All right, there I am. Great, well, let's get started. Welcome to the Red Pill for Women. This is Escape the Alternative Health Matrix, and I'm Josie. And I want you to know a little bit about me before I get started, that I am someone who used to have 8 autoimmune diseases, conditions like Hashimoto's, lupus, MS, and I also had chronic illnesses. I had an eating disorder, ADD, ADHD, and I had these conditions through my mid-teens to my late 20s. Went on a huge healing quest, trying supplements, diets, nothing worked until I found where I work today, a new life center, and they were the first people to tell me, hey, Josie, you're the problem, and it's your emotional state that's creating your illnesses and diseases. And I learned how to resolve my emotional state. All of my autoimmune diseases and chronic illnesses permanently healed. That was 9 years ago. I'm no longer in remission. Don't take any medications or supplements or do anything special. I'm a healthy woman, and I'm here to teach other women with chronic illnesses and autoimmune diseases how to become healthy too and permanently heal your illnesses. And so today we're going to be talking about grief and loss, a topic that's very near and dear to my heart. I'll share a little bit why in just a moment, but the title of our video today is the grief and loss connection to autoimmune diseases and chronic illnesses. And so this topic came up because here in the US, it is Thanksgiving this week. And the Thanksgiving holiday and all of the holidays, that is a time that we reflect, that we have to reflect. And we look at where we are in our lives, and we also remembering past holidays and those who used to be with us that are no longer there. Remembering those we have lost during this time of year. And that really got brought up for me. When I was 15, I lost my dad. And I still remember every holiday season feeling a profound sense of sadness, a profound sense of grief, knowing that he wasn't at that table, that I couldn't give him those presents anymore, and really remembering the times that we had. And it really brought up that grief experience. And so for those of you with autoimmune diseases, I know you're out there, and chronic illnesses, this time of year brings up our grief and loss, which leads me to what we're talking about today, which is the direct correlation and connection between grief and loss and developing an autoimmune disease or chronic illness. And for me, that happened right away. I didn't realize it at the time, but when my dad died 6 months later, I developed my first autoimmune disease, which was rheumatoid arthritis. And then my health spiraled from there. Continued to get more and more autoimmune diseases as I experienced more losses, and we'll talk about that more in a moment. So we're talking about grief and loss, the connection to autoimmune disease and chronic illness. We're going to talk about losses that you might not have thought actually caused your autoimmune disease and chronic illness. We will learn why our illnesses and diseases are not a mystery, and how we can actually look back in time and see the progression of our illnesses. And most importantly, I'm going to be sharing about what do we do with this? What do we do with grief and loss in terms of autoimmune disease and illness? And how can we adopt a new perspective? I'll be sharing that at the end. So I'm so glad that you're here with me. So again, first let's define grief and loss. What is loss? Because we tend to think of grief and loss, I say them together, but these are actually separate concepts, and that's really good to define. So loss is something emotionally important to you that you will no longer have. Again, something emotionally important to you that you no longer have. That's a loss. And it gave you meaning and purpose. So that's the experience of loss. Loss is like the actual event of losing something important to us. Now, here's the difference between loss and grief. You got to pay attention here. Now, where loss is the event, grief is that ongoing emotional experience that lives inside of us. It lives under the skin. So again, grief is that ongoing emotional experience where loss is the event. Now, I know when I was growing up, we think about losses and we always go to kind of default to the loss of people, physical people in our lives, people that we've loved. And that is true and valid. And so the most common losses of those that we've loved, and we're going to kind of think of these as a young person growing into adult, that first significant loss of a pet, right? And then the second one would be loss of a grandparent. Then loss of a friend. Many of us lost friends, oftentimes to suicide in high school or maybe our early 20s. And then another significant loss is, of course, loss of a parent. And those are easier losses for us to define, right? We kind of look back in time, those ones that really hurt our heart, like a huge gut punch to us, the loss of someone. But what I really want to do right now is dive a little deeper because, like I said, and I'll share a little bit more about this, you had a loss that predated and actually created your autoimmune disease and chronic illness. And we'll talk about how to identify that in a moment. But there are hidden losses that may have been actually the one that created your autoimmune disease and chronic illness. And these are common losses that are not the death of someone that we love. So one of those is, and the most common actually for the women that I work with, this is the most common loss that's not the loss of a person. This loss is getting pregnant or giving birth. And that loss that we experience as women is our freedom as a woman, a freedom of the life that we had before. That there was very much a before you, before this pregnancy, and there was a you after. And there was a significant loss that happened. Again, so pregnancy, very common loss, creating autoimmune disease or chronic illness. Another one, divorce. Right, so maybe that's either your parents' divorce or personally, as an adult, your own divorce. And the loss there would be the loss of life with your partner, that life that you created together. Or if it was your parents, the loss of that family unit, the loss of going home and having a mom and dad to greet you when you come home from school. Significant loss, divorce. Third one, empty nester. Again, a very common loss I see that created a woman's autoimmune disease or chronic illness. And empty nesters is meaning the children, the last of your children leaving home. And so then it just is you again. And that loss is the loss of your role as a mother. Your role as a mother, that role that gave you meaning and purpose, and suddenly you're all on your own again, having to redefine who you are in this world. Now, the fifth common loss that isn't the loss of a loved one is retirement, right? Retiring from your job or career, and that loss is having to start all over again. Losing that career that gave you that meaning and purpose and made you feel like somebody out in the world. Suddenly you have all this free time and you have to find yourself all over again. And so I hope you can see that losses are much more than just losing someone we love. Again, the way that I like to think about a loss, a significant loss, is anytime there was a life event where there was a before me, there was a before of who I was, and then this event happened, this loss, and then there was a me after. And that me after significantly changed, and not in a positive way. These events are like thunderclaps in our life, and we're going to talk more. We're going to label these kinds of losses in just a moment. But I want to share more about the connection to grief and loss, to autoimmune disease and chronic illnesses. And like I shared, after my dad died when I was 15, 6 months later, I got rheumatoid arthritis. And then the next autoimmune disease I got was when I had the loss of graduating college. And I had to go out in the real world and didn't know who I was or how in the world I was going to support myself. I remember feeling so scared inside. And not long after that, I developed the symptoms and the autoimmune disease Hashimoto's thyroiditis. So what this leads me into is a really important concept called the allostatic load. Now, the allostatic load is defined as the wear and tear on the body, which accumulates as an individual is exposed to major acute stressors. Now, this is really important because guess what major acute stressors are? Major acute stressors are the losses that we have experienced in our lifetime. Again, these are the losses that we've experienced from a young age, from like birth to now. These are the significant before and after these losses that completely change your idea of yourself in the world, again, and not in a positive way. So let's give some examples of these major acute stressors, AKA losses. These losses are huge stressors. So one would be a sibling being born. Let's say you were one of the only child like I was. I was the oldest. I'm the oldest, and your sibling's born, and all of a sudden your whole world gets flipped upside down. That's a major acute stressor, a huge loss. Another one, a pet dying. I guess your grandparents dying, graduating from school, a romantic breakup, graduating from college, your first real job and going out into the real world. Getting pregnant, huge, major acute stressor, going through a divorce, losing one or both of your parents. So again, these events are the ones that shake up not just us emotionally, but again, this allostatic load is saying that the accumulation of these events that we suppress emotionally inside of our body eventually causes a wear and tear that over time, our immune system collapses and we develop autoimmune disease and chronic illness. And so here's the interesting thing is that for me, when I developed my first autoimmune disease, rheumatoid arthritis, it felt at the time like it came out of thin air. Like, you know, I was like 16 at the time. Why was I getting rheumatoid arthritis? But if we take the concept of the allostatic load and we back up a lifetime to birth until the development of autoimmune diseases, you're going to find something incredibly interesting. You are going to find that the ongoing development of your chronic illnesses and autoimmune diseases is going to overlap and directly correlate with these major acute losses, these stressors that you experienced in your life. So to illustrate this point, I'm going to share a few highlights from my allostatic load. And what you really want to do is think of yourself from birth on and the seemingly small chronic conditions that you started to develop, and ask yourself what loss was happening in your life at that time. So for instance, when I was born healthy, right? But my first chronic condition, I developed allergies when I was 3. Guess what happened when I was 3 years old? My dad ended up having to go to rehab because he was having a problem with his drinking. So again, that was a loss. My dad going to rehab, leaving the house for a number of months. And as a result, that emotional stress of that loss, my body resulted in allergies. We moved from the small town I grew up in to the big city of Denver when I was 7. And about 6 months later, I started to develop strep and ear infections, and they became kind of chronic. So again, as I'm reading this, think of yourself. When I started middle school, and that was a major loss, major acute stressor for me, the loss of leaving that little elementary school that I loved into having lockers and periods and classes with different teachers. I developed asthma 6 months later. Again, like I shared, my dad died when I was 15. 6 months later, developed rheumatoid arthritis, had a big romantic breakup outside of when I started college. I developed food allergies about 6 months later. And then my body reached a tipping point. So what happens is we go through all of these major losses, these major acute stressors. We suppress them in our body, the emotional impact of it. And our body is giving us these yellow flags, these huge warning signs telling us that the immune system is becoming compromised. Those warning signs, like I said, were all of the seemingly small conditions that became larger that led up to the big ones, which would be the autoimmune diseases and the chronic illnesses. So we're talking about, again, food allergies, food sensitivities, sinus infections, strep throat, ear infections, depression, anxiety. These were your warning flags that your body, your immune system was becoming compromised due to the emotional impact of the losses in your life. And so here's the thing. Then we reach a tipping point where your body, my body, could not handle any more suppressed emotional losses. We suppressed it all in there, and then we reached the tipping point of one more major acute stressor, one more big loss that pushed the body over the edge, and the immune system collapsed. You developed chronic illnesses, you developed autoimmune diseases. And for me, again, that was graduating college. That was my autoimmune tipping point. And 6 months later, my body developed Hashimoto's thyroiditis. And from then on, about 6 months to every year, I developed a new autoimmune disease. Now, here's the important thing, 2 points I want to make. Your autoimmune diseases and chronic illnesses, they are not mystery illnesses. Again, they are not mystery illnesses. We can know that through the allostatic load. You look through the progression of your health problems and health challenges that led to your autoimmune disease and chronic illness, and you will see the gradual progression that directly correlates with the losses, the emotional losses that you have experienced in your life. Now, here's an interesting thing, and I call it the 6-month rule. You know, I know when I developed rheumatoid arthritis and then Hashimoto's, I wanted to know where it came from. And as we know out there, the doctors, both Western and alternative, do not know what truly causes autoimmune diseases and chronic illnesses. So if you want to find what loss, also known as a major acute stressor, was the loss that was your tipping point, take generally the time that you started to develop the symptoms of your autoimmune disease or chronic illness. Go 6 months back. That's why it's called the 6-month rule. Go 6 months back from the time that you first started developing your symptoms. Look at your calendar, and you will find exactly what that stressor was, what time frame that was, and you have to ask yourself, what was going on in my life from a loss perspective at that time? And you will be able to pinpoint the loss that was your tipping point into developing your autoimmune diseases and your chronic illnesses. And so the point that I really want to be making today is, I know for me, I knew I went through significant losses. And I also knew that as I was becoming older in my 20s, my health was deteriorating and I was continuing to develop more autoimmune diseases and chronic illnesses. And there was no connection that I could find out there between my experience of loss and my autoimmune disease. What I know now as a healthy person is that there is a direct correlation. And as women, we cannot ignore the emotional impact of the losses we've been through. They actually created your autoimmune disease and chronic illness. That's how significant our experience as women of loss is, that emotional impact that it gives to us. And again, the allostatic load, this concept, backs that up. And you can look more into it. There's a lot of research out there about the allostatic load. And it really brings me to the point that we have to slow down and we have to acknowledge the impact of our losses. What is the impact of your losses? These losses, again, created your condition. And the problem is, and here's the problem, as women, what we have historically done is that we have powered through the losses that we've been through in our life. We suppress them over time, kind of like a layer cake inside of us, pushing them down into our physical body and powering through our life, continuing forward. I look at it like a racehorse with blinders on. That's what we've all done. And we didn't know that there was an impact from that. I knew that I wasn't handling the loss of my dad well, but I didn't know the true impact that was actually going to have in my life. I didn't know that it was going to deteriorate my life and my health to the point where I was going to develop autoimmune disease and chronic illnesses. Your health is the result and is the consequence of us powering through our losses and not dealing with them. So what I want you to know is that you have to deal with your losses. You must deal with your losses, because the reality of life, the reality of all of our lives, is that life is full of loss. Life is always going to be full of loss. And you out there with an autoimmune disease or chronic illness, you will continue to encounter more huge emotional losses. Again, these major acute stressors in your life. And if you don't develop a new way, like I had to do this, if we don't develop a new way, what happens is we suppress that and the body will respond with more autoimmune diseases and more chronic illnesses. This is how critical it is. And so we have to stop powering through our losses. And instead, what we want to do, and this is what I had to do, is I had to slow way down. I had to slow way down. And I had to learn how to actually acknowledge the loss, not just try to run through it and act like it didn't happen, not try to make myself overly busy in my life and distract myself and keep going, because my health was the result of that. All of my health problems were. We have to slow down. We have to acknowledge our losses. I want you to be taking time for yourself. When we experience loss, that we deserve to be able to take that time off, to spend time with ourselves, to spend time with our loved ones, to reflect on the emotional impact of it, and instead of running through the loss, to actually learn how to work through the loss so we don't suppress the emotional impact of it and it doesn't create, as a result, autoimmune disease and chronic illness in our physical body. And so if you are out there and what I am sharing resonates with you, that you know, just like me, that you've experienced significant losses in your life, and you know and resonate that there is a direct connection to your losses and the development of your autoimmune diseases and chronic illnesses, well, that is exactly what I do. That's what I had to do. I had to resolve the emotional impact, and it allowed me to become fully healthy and heal. And that's what I teach in my program. I teach women how to resolve themselves and that suppressed emotional state that is full of our losses, so that it enables our body to be able to naturally heal and self-repair chronic illness and autoimmune disease, not go into remission, but for your immune system to go back to normal, the body to re-regulate, and you to no longer have your condition. And so if this is something, again, that resonates with you, I have a link below in this live. And in this, I'm going to give a little link to have an application. You can apply for my course. Love to meet you, see if you would be a good fit. And if you're just out there and want more information about what I'm talking about, because I know no one out there is talking about the connection between grief and loss and our autoimmune disease and chronic illness, I want you to watch my free 101 course on autoimmune disease and chronic illness. The link will be in the description also down below. And in this video, it's animated, it has just my voice, you're really going to learn why you really developed your autoimmune disease and chronic illness. Also, why everything you've been trying, whether that's medication, whether that's supplements, whether that's food diets or cleanses, why everything you've been trying to heal has not worked and you still have your conditions. And most importantly, I'm going to share what the healing journey really looks like. And when I'm talking about healing journey, I'm talking about your body permanently healing, no longer having the disease or illness and not having to manage it at all again for the rest of your life. So again, Thank you so much for joining me for this live. I'm going to go check in and see if I have any comments here. Just a second. I'm getting, let's see, I think I do this. Let's see. So I'm going to go here. Okay, thanks for hanging tight here. We are just going to go into my studio and see if there's anyone out there, any kind of questions that they have. Thank you guys all for being here. Yeah, like I said, grief, I've got so much more to share about grief and loss, but I never realized how directly connected it was. It is the cause. So let's go in here. Let's see. Oh, great. Well, thank you, Happy Wife School, letting me know that I'm coming in loud and clear. And to all of you that are watching this video, thank you from the bottom of my heart for being here. And I look forward to joining you in my next live. All right. Thanks and take care.